about centers. I'm not anti-center, but I'm pro-skill. And the NBA has decided with their rule changes, it's a guard-driven, wing-driven league. And so the 5 best players I've ever seen, I know Kareem, all the points, but I don't think he was as skilled as Michael Jordan or Kobe or certainly LeBron or Magic or Larry Bird. So your takeaway on my kind of rant that comes off as sort of anti-center.
Well, if you don't have Kareem in your top 5, you're just wrong. I mean, it's just an invalid opinion. It's just like coming out today and say today is a great Thursday in the herd. It's just wrong. It's Wednesday. Listen, there are 3 people who have a credible case for greatest player ever. And unlike the Jordan sycophants, I can concede, obviously, Michael Jordan has a credible case for the greatest player ever. They can't concede anyone else does. LeBron James obviously has a credible case for the greatest player ever. He has the best case as it happens. And Kareem, who has more points than anybody, more MVPs than anybody, won the same amount of titles as Jordan. And by the way, I should remind you, his basketball life might be the most perfect. Never lost in high school, lost twice in college by a combined 2 points, won 3 Final Four MVPs and 3 National Players of the Year, and by year 2 was the best player in the entire NBA. And 1 league MVP and finals MVP. So those are your 3 best players ever. Your whole skill versus not skilled, it's just bad opinion. I love you. It's just a wrong opinion, though.
Okay, let's segue to this. A lot of people are saying with The Last Dance doc that Jordan, can you imagine him now in this cotton candy soft love tap pillow fight league? He'd average 45 points a game. Do you buy that?
Well, it's insanity. And the thing is this. It cannot go only in one direction. If you are arguing that Michael Jordan, who, let's break it down fully. Jordan averaged more than 35 once in his career. The 1987 season where he averaged, 87 season where he averaged 37 a game. People say, well, if he played at today's pace, fact of the matter, the 1987 season was played at a faster pace than today's NBA. Look it up. The 80s were a higher scoring decade than today's NBA. So we're really not talking about the year he averaged 35 or the year he averaged 37 because he wasn't winning titles. He was getting swept out of the playoffs or knocked out in the first round. We're talking about in the 90s when he averaged 31, 32 and won titles, that Jordan could now average 40, 45 points. Well, you must therefore also be saying that Dominique Wilkins, who averaged 29 when Jordan averaged 31, would be averaging 40, 41 points, and you've got to do it in the other direction. If today's era is so much easier to score in than a guy like, Kevin Durant, if he went back to 1992, would be lucky to crack 20 points per game. That's the conversion. If we're going to add 50% to Jordan's points per game, to do it retrofit it, you got to take 33% away from Durant's points per game. But no one wants to do this. But, Colin, here's the most fascinating thing. I thought with the Jordan doc, there would be some young people throwing stones at the era. I mean, we saw Michael Jordan on camera in the 98 season say, 10 years ago, guys were smoking cigarettes at halftime. I thought there'd be more people being like, oh, that's interesting. Wonder how that would hold up. That hasn't happened. Instead, what's happened is the folks of Jordan's era have thrown stones at the current era. Because when you say he could average 40 or 45, what you're saying is today's guys stink. They're not as good as his era because nobody today, aside from Harden, averages even 35. And so Jordan would be great in any era, but the idea that he would be the best player in today's era by a couple standard deviations falls upon against any scrutiny.
Also should be noted the mid-range jumper is not in vogue, and he would probably shoot more threes, which is easier scoring for veteran players, and Michael was never a gifted three-point shooter except for the 2 years or a year they moved in the arc. So to your point, I do agree. Let me talk about a couple of football topics. Number one, I have never been a huge fan of Cam Newton, though I do acknowledge he was magical in his MVP season, and sort of the emotional style of which it's sort of his DNA was really beneficial. He plays with a great deal of momentum and energy, and it was magic. My knock on him is that he is not easy to coach, doesn't win enough, mechanically doesn't appear to be the same thrower he was 5 years ago, and he's banged up and out of his prime, I believe. And frankly, not accurate enough in now an accurate quarterback league where you've got to be in the 60, 65 percentile. I never thought he had much of a market because I think he's a celebrity and nobody wants a celebrity backup. Are you bothered by the fact that nobody appears to be even remotely interested in Cam Newton?
Well, I just want people to acknowledge and admit that it can't just be about football if Cam Newton can't get a job. Because here, people say, well, he's not consistent. Okay, it's a fair point. Joe Flacco was remarkably consistent for 6 years after they won the Super Bowl. He was consistently terrible all 6 years. And guess what? Denver traded for him even though he was making upwards of $18 million per year. All right, well, then with Cam, it's not about consistency. It's about health. And he's been inconsistent health-wise. You know who was very consistent health-wise? Sam Bradford. He was consistently always injured. Yet, despite that, Philly gave him a deal. Minnesota traded for the deal. Then Arizona gave him another deal. You know a guy who played 8 good games in his career? Case Keenum, John Elway, come on down. Hey, Nick Foles, you played 6 magical quarters. $88 million from Jacksonville, and the Chicago trades for him. So when it comes to Cam, what I wish folks would acknowledge is for a lot of the decision makers in the NFL, Phillip Rivers and his inconsistency and interceptions that go along with showing players up on the field and screaming at coaches, it's a little more palatable when the post-game ridiculous outfit is a bolo tie. For Cam, with a post-game outfit is something that I happen to think is super fly, but you wouldn't be caught dead in, Colin Cowherd. He all of a sudden, for some guys, it's like, I don't know if that works. So until we get to a place where we have 32 consistently healthy quarterbacks, there should be a place for Cam Newton.
Yeah, that's why I've said Cam's a celebrity. Nobody wants a celebrity backup. I don't think it's just health. I think that's a nonsense argument. And I don't think it's just consistency. I think he's a celebrity. And that's why nobody wants Baker Mayfield eventually as a backup. That's why nobody wanted Johnny. I think when you're a celebrity in this league and Cam is a big star, you either build around him or you're not interested. So let's move to the next topic. You have a relationship with Aaron Rodgers. He slid into your DMs once or something like that. I do not.
Yeah.
But
slid into my DMs. Joy, explain to Colin the implication of that during the commercial
He knows
break,
it.
please.
That's why he says it like that.
All right, go ahead, Colin.
Okay. I am lit. I just don't let you guys know it. So, my argument is if the Packers drafted Jordan Love, but the next draft pick was a wide receiver, this would be fine. Because then they could go to him and say, listen, this is what we did with you. We're finding the next you, even though we may never play him, but we went and got a receiver, a blocking tight end, 3 interior offensive linemen. We are going to help. We helped you. We drafted all offensive guys. But when they drafted Jordan Love and a running back and never addressed wide receiver, I think it's going to fall flat for Aaron, and there will be some bitterness throughout the course of the season. Or do you believe, Nick Wright, in your relationship with him, he'll handle it like a politician and say all the right stuff?
Oh, I think he'll handle it well because he's a pro, but you're spot on. It's not just they drafted a running back. They didn't even draft like a cool receiving back like my soon-to-be 2-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs did. They drafted a bruising power back that Pro Football Focus did not have in their top 250 players in the draft. That's what they spent their second-round pick on. And their first-round pick, they spent on a guy who they pray doesn't play a snap until 2022. And so if you're they traded up for him. If you're Rodgers, I think you justifiably should be more than missed at the draft. And then I will reiterate the point I made last week. I would be moved from more than miffed to downright irate that somebody was whispering sweet nothings in Bob McGinn's ear to where they talk about me like I'm a problem. I've used this quote before. Bill James is one of the smartest ones. The bad teams have a horrible habit of blaming their best players for their biggest problems. We've seen this